Morning. This is Bruce Yeckel. I'm talking to Ben Sears and his partner in the Oakton projects. Give us an idea of how you got involved with music.
Uh, well, music has been part of my life really from the start. My grandparents, particularly my father's parents, were very musical. But there was always music in the house. My mother loved to listen to it, mostly classical, but I was hearing uh, show music and film music a fair amount as a kid. But I didn't start singing until after college. Don't ask me why. It's just the way life went. And once I got going, of course, I was loving it and poked around, figuring out. I did some opera and did some classical, and really just found that the Great American Songbook, as they call it, really kind of fit me nicely. So that's what I've been doing.
Had any other part-time job?
Um, well, I worked at Harvard Law School on the staff for many years. That paid the bills. And left us the flexibility to do the music. So that
You
was what
did
that was
not
our
see,
lives.
as I recall, you said you did not see Harvard Hasty Pudding shows and you did not
No, I did
attend,
not.
attend the out-of-town tryouts. 30,
I sit here
20
I sit
miles
here in
away.
shame. I did see some out of town
You're frozen.
tryouts. To see what other people are doing. But I did see. I know I saw Cyrano with Christopher Plummer, who just died, and I saw Woman of the Year very early on, which was fun. And I'm sure I saw more, but
Did you have friends who
those are two that
attended?
I can call on.
Did you have friends who attended with you?
All right.
Did you have friends who attended?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, sometimes I was one of those that didn't mind going to the theater alone, so it was probably a mix of things.
When did you start buying cast albums?
Probably in high school, though I didn't really start doing it seriously, as it were, until college and afterwards. I was buying all kinds of different things as a kid.
The music.
Not really, I'm not sure I was focused on any one kind of musical genre at that point.
Did your parents go to musicals?
Yeah, they did. Not much, not much in Boston. I grew up in the suburbs of Boston, and there was a lot of local theater going on when I was a kid, and my high school did a musical every year, so I was seeing a lot of shows while I was growing up, just not at the professional theaters, but some good productions. We had some good people around.
What shows do you remember seeing in high school?
Oh, I remember seeing Guys and Dolls, Oklahoma, Carousel, Annie Get Your Gun, Brigadoon. Let's see. I know there's more. Anything Goes somewhere in there. I think My Fair Lady showed up somewhere. Just off the top of my head.
Did they do these with full orchestras?
Yeah, usually, or what was comparable to a Broadway pit orchestra. So whatever would fit in the pit, as it were. Not 101 strings.
Did they have some teachers involved in the playing and conducting?
Yeah, and I mean the high school did. In the town where I grew up and some of the neighboring towns, there were some very good semi-professional musicians who were involved in these, often as the conductors. There were two women in particular in our town that were very good, and they sort of traded off which year, every other year, one of them would do her show. And they always had a good group of freelancers.
Tell us how you got into recording. You recorded many unusual
well, Brad and I started performing together around 1990. And we did a show. Somebody had written a play about the Kaiser Wilhelm, the World War I Kaiser, and it was a monologue with songs, so it needed a singer, an actor, singer, and a pianist, and so we did it, but it wasn't quite long enough to be an evening by itself, so we did some early Irving Berlin on the other half, sort of Berlin the city and Berlin the man. And when we got done, we just had been exploring this era of Berlin's writing and really was fascinated by it. And at some point we just thought, well, let's record some of this because we're doing music that no one's done or no one's recorded. And that's how we got started. And the next thing we knew, we were on a long-term Irving Berlin project. We've done 6 Berlin CDs, and if we can ever get into a studio again, we'll do number 7, and that'll be the whole series. And it's been great fun. And it's one of the things that we've done, that we've tried to do, is find the lesser known repertoire by the really famous songwriters.
Where did all this rare music come? You didn't go down to Kmart and look under
No, we had a really great sheet music dealer that we worked with, who was getting his hands on all kinds of fascinating stuff, and he had contacts. So we actually got some things that I'm not so sure that we got things that never were published, but we got things that had long been out of print and hard to find. Sometimes just in photocopies, but because he knew someone who had a collection of, say, all Berlin or a big Gershwin collection or something like that. And so he could often get us unusual things. And once people find out you're doing this, all of a sudden, they're cleaning out somebody's attic and they find a stack of sheet music and say, oh, Ben and Brad would want this. And unfortunately, usually they're just full of, the standards as time goes by and stuff like that. But every once in a while, this little gem just comes to the surface, and not always the people you'd expect. We had found, oh gosh, now I can't think of the name of it, with this wonderful song that Ted Snyder wrote, not with Irving Berlin, that we did for a number of years, and it was just somebody had given us a pile of music, and there it was, and we liked it. So that was what we were doing.
In terms of performing, who was playing piano? And
Brad is the pianist, and he does sing, and I'm strictly the singer.
So you are not capable of piano, or you're not as good as Brad?
I can pick out my tune when I'm learning a song, but I am not a pianist.
You've never tried four hands on the piano?
No, we have not done four hands. Well, he's done some forehand things for some of the concerts we've done that were with a bigger group. The only thing we did something where we traded off, and I sat down and just sort of did a boom chick, and there he is. But that was pretty elementary, so it wasn't showing off any kind of fancy skill on my part. But
actually, talking about the four hands on our Noel and Cole album.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
with Tim Harbold and Valerie Anastasio. So it's Noel Coward and Cole Porter, of course. We opened the show with Howard's song "Together with Music," and I'm a switch hitter. I'm both a singer and a pianist. And Tim is only a pianist. pianist, but for that number, we all came out on stage, and we did this on the recording as well. I start being a singer and then go back to the piano and play four hands with Tim on the piano, and then go back on and become a singer. So I have played a lot of four hands in my life.
Well, now, I had talked to Brad about his beginnings. Let me talk to you about your beginnings in terms of music.
Well, so my beginnings were, I started playing piano in my teens. I initially was self-taught, and I was playing a lot of show music. And then I came to the attention of a local piano teacher who gave me lessons, but totally turned me toward the classical repertoire. And I happen to like classical music as well. And I studied with him, and then went off to college and continued to play piano as much as I could. And then finally, after getting a couple of business degrees, switched over to music and studied with a tremendously good pianist. And he also was more classical. So I continued to build my classical chops, as they say. But when I got out of college, except for teaching privately, the only job I could immediately find was to start playing in pit orchestras. And so there I flipped back to show music. And the first show for which I was hired after college was Annie, Get Your Gun, Irving, Berlin. And after that was, I moved to Boston, and Ben told you the rest of the story of, we started putting on shows and started making recordings and focused on Irving, Berlin. And there you go. That's a truly reduced version of a longer story.
It's funny how a showbiz career goes. I remember seeing a quote by Michael York saying, you really can't plan what your career is going to be. It sort of comes to you. And I think when we started, if you'd asked us, we probably would have said, "Oh, we're going to focus on Gershwin."
Gershwin, and also we also liked a lot of. I'm not sure what kind of repertoire you would call it. Historic repertoire.
Yeah, we talked a bit about this.
Americana.
Yeah,
we liked Gershwin and Americana.
Yeah, and we didn't expect that we'd become quite so involved in the world of Irving, Berlin. So, it's just one of those sort of serendipitous things, I guess. And it certainly has been an amazing journey. I mean, our respect for him just grows and grows and grows every time we're looking at a new group of songs.
Because you've done 6 Berlin. How many Gershwin?
Yep.
2, 1?
We did 1 Ira and 1 George, and in both cases we did a mix of songs they wrote together and songs they wrote with other people. And as far as we know, we're the only people who put out a recording for Ira's centenary in 1996. Everybody who could play the piano did something for George's, but I think we did a few things that other people weren't doing.
You recorded anything from Park Avenue?
Oh,
yeah,
yes.
we did. We're very fond of that show.
That's Arthur Schwartz.
We did.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember.
Well, hold on. We got the CD. I'll tell you which one we did.
Because we're also
For the Life of Me.
Yeah, For the Life of Me. We're also big Arthur Schwartz fans. So it was great to do For the Life of Me.
Do you still have unrecorded music for Schwartz?
Oh,
meaning,
well, yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of Schwartz that we've got a pretty extensive collection of his songs, and we've only done
a handful.
Yeah, and actually, with Valerie and Tim, she did a Schwartz song.
She did a Schwartz song. You did Dancing in the Dark.
That's right, Dancing in the Dark. So we haven't done much, and whether we would you know, after we get Berlin done, do unrecorded Arthur Schwartz or something like that. We have no idea.
Do you have more
I-
Park? Do you have more Park Avenue?
We've got all the published music. I know that. And we've done more than just that one song.
Yes. In live performances, we've done, we may have done all, there are only 3 songs published from that score that I know of. And I think we've done all 3 of them in,
Yeah, I think so.
In performance.
Good for you for remembering that. It's been 20 years.
Well, I love the score.
So.
I love the score. And of course, in Bob Kimball's complete lyrics, you can see the other songs, and Ira's lyrics are top notch.
Yeah,
they always are.
How many albums have additional performers? 13 in all?
let's see. 4, I think.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm trying to think.
Well, everybody's step
of the 6 Berlin. We have additional performers on
3 of them.
3 of them. One is dedicated to the Music Box years, and so we have. We wanted to do the opening number, the 8 Little Notes, which included the 8 Little Notes, and so there are 8 other singers, 8 women, and another pianist on that recording. When we did the World War II years of Irving Berlin songs, we included Tim Harbold and Valerie Anastasio, and then we did one other.
We did 2 albums with them,
right?
Besides that, the Berlin,
right? So we did 2 other albums with them. One on which was Nolan Cole, and the other was Fred and Ethel, Fred Astaire, Ethel Merman. A lot of songwriters, the classic songwriters, wrote for both of them, and so that was the theme of that album, which was also a live show. But then we did one album of Irving Berlin's late songs from the late 20s and early 30s, with 3 other singers.
Yeah.
Lee Barrett, Peter Miller, and Cynthia Mork. And on that one,
Lee was the primary singer.
Other singer, right? And Peter played the ukulele.
Yeah, and did some singing.
We did some campaign songs, but the focus of that particular Irving Berlin album was the lost score for the film Reaching for the Moon. We got our hands on as many of those songs or parts of those songs as we possibly could, and reconstructed that score, which only gets written about in books, but no one had really taken the time to put the music back together. And so that's the focus of that album. And Lee was the predominant female singer on that with us.
Problem was that when they started doing movie musicals, they overdid it as far as the public. You and I, they didn't overdo it. So was that the case that he wrote a score and they?
Well, he came up with the idea for this story and sold it to whichever film company it was. And as it went into production, it suddenly became a Douglas Fairbanks movie. And the songs just kept getting whittled away, and they changed the story dramatically from what Berlin had written. And he was furious. And for the rest of his life, if you wanted to set him off, all you had to do was say "Reaching for the Moon." He never got over his anger about that, and I don't blame him. You know, he gave them something viable, and they trashed it.
And it was, it's even more complicated, because what he did, he wrote the score. The only 2 songs left in the picture itself are the title song, which they use under the credits, but no one ever sings the lyrics. It's an instrumental. And then Bing Crosby, a very young, uncredited, very young, up and coming, sings "When the Folks High Up Do the Mean Lowdown" at a party, and it's basically obliterated in the party noise. People talking over it, all this. I mean, you do get it, and it's playing. But that was basically it. And the song had about 7 or more songs in it. And at that time, the way the studios handled it, and Irving Berlin never let this happen again. He handed over the songs to the studio, and it's common knowledge that once that happened, the studio basically could do what they wanted, but he also handed over the copyrights. And so he had to fight with the studio to get those songs back because he didn't want them keeping them. He wanted to keep them in his own, under his own copyright.
And he did get them back.
And he did. But you know, he basically never reused them. He used the verse of one of them for as the unknown verse for "How Deep Is the Ocean." And
oh, right.
And
yeah.
so the verse is actually from "Reaching for the Moon," from one of the songs for "Reaching for the Moon." And then in the past few years, at least one of them came out in one of the unknown Irving Berlin collections.
He did
maybe two
publish a couple, I think.
And he published a couple, but you have to do your research to figure out which ones those are, and we did.
Andrea Markovici was doing "Reaching for the Moon" on her Berlin shows.
Meaning the title song.
The title song,
Yeah.
yeah. But she was about the only one.
It's a fascinating score.
It is
and
a
it's
really good
great.
score.
The songs are terrific, Berlin.
Yeah.
This is 1931, or what year are we talking about?
I think reaching for the Moon is actually 29.
Yeah.
It's very early.
Very, very early.
It's right after it's after the jazz singer craze, and they were immediately putting musicals in production. So I think it's 1929.
Yeah, I can look it up for you if you want.
You have any unused material from Mr. President? Last night ago?
We do.
Do we have I guess
we
do
do.
have some unused. We certainly have stuff that we do have some unused, and I mean, he wrote a lot of songs for that show.
And in fact, we're doing one that was cut. I mean, when we're putting together, I mean, we basically got all the songs lined up. I heard Ben say this from the other room, that we've got the songs lined up. We're rehearsing them for the final Irving Berlin volume in the recording. And we do a couple of songs from Mr. President. But the one that we're doing that was like in the tryouts, and Irving Berlin really liked it and published it, but then it was excised almost immediately, is called "Poor Joe," and it's about Joe Stalin.
The death of Stalin.
And it uses the song of the Volga boatman as the bridge between the verses.
Yeah.
It's great fun.
It's sort of like the saga of Jenny, in the way it's set up. And even sort of musically, it has a similar feel to that. But it's about how when Lenin died, when Stalin died, they buried him in the Kremlin wall. But then Khrushchev had him moved to a less auspicious place. And I guess on this side of the ocean, we thought this was a very significant thing. So we even got a song written about it.
Right. And we've got some others that are in copyist hand.
Yeah.
We've got a few songs for the final recording that are in just the copyist format. And Mr. President, we do have those. We're doing a couple from that show.
Yeah.
But not the obvious ones. I mean, frankly, some of, I mean,
well, I can't do the First Lady of the Land.
Right. The First Lady is one of the best.
It's probably the best song in the show. But
are you aware?
We found some.
Are you aware of who the first person they wanted to play the president was?
I do.
Now that you've asked, I know it, but I can't tell you.
So
remind us. You have to tell us.
Also known as the Music Man.
Okay. Yes.
Harold Hill.
Yes. Robert Preston.
Robert Preston. He would have been a great president, and he and Nanette Fabre would have been a terrific pairing.
Yeah, that probably would have been a much stronger pairing if they could.
He wanted to play Pancha Villa.
Ah, okay.
Which closed in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
It would have been better to play Mr. President. I mean, the thing with Mr. President is it's a good score. Is it up to par with Annie Get Your Gun or Call Me Madam? No. But you know, not every score that comes out of the gate is up to that level. It's a good score, but it's just the feeling is absolutely right. It's a little mistimed. It's a little,
Yeah.
you know, it's looking a little far back, and you know, Berlin tried to update it a little, you know, keep it up to date by doing and including the Washington twist.
Right.
And that's a cute song, but it's not substantial enough to sort of update the whole score. And you know, it's a sweet score, and it deserves more attention. I mean, frankly, I wish someone would mount a production of it, so that we really could see what a decent production would do now that it's become an historic piece.
Well, there's something for encores to do.
Yeah.
Now, who do you think would have sung the Stalin song? What character?
It's not clear.
I hope
Yeah,
not
it is
Ryan-
not.
No, it's not
Robert
clear at all.
Ryan. I hope not Robert Ryan.
No.
Oh, no.
It wouldn't have been one of the leads. It would have been some, and it may have just been a character that just kind of walks on to sing that song. As
Well,
sometimes
no, I
happens.
think it would have been. Isn't the Russian ambassador in there?
Yeah, but he wouldn't have sung it.
Yeah,
It was.
But see, that may have
it's
been the
sung from an
problem.
American point of view.
right.
So, I have to check.
Yeah, so I don't know that. I don't remember who would have sung it in the show.
So that's
I mean, frankly, in that score, I think that Fabre was the one who inspired the best songs, because
Yeah.
again, you have First Lady, and then you have that other delightful number that she sings about what she has to give back, because now that she's First Lady, she can't accept gifts.
Well, that's First Lady of the Land.
Um,
She talks about she can't keep any of the gifts.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
So Ben's got the book. He's looking it up because we have to cheat sometimes too. I mean, and that's one of the things about Irving Berlin. He wrote so much. It is absolutely, it's a devil to try to keep all of it straight.
That's for sure.
And so much of it is just, as Ben said, we've grown to love it so much. And we just keep finding new things, even in songs that we know. And so he's looking in the book, and there's Poor Joe,
Joe.
and it doesn't say.
It doesn't say who it was intended for. It just says dropped from the score before the Boston tryout.
Yeah,
So that's really early.
yeah.
Never
So
made
it
it on-
may, yeah, it may not have even made it on stage.
Yeah. Yeah, the first tryout was in Boston, so they knocked it out during rehearsals. So who knows
it
what?
just played Boston and then came to New York, I think.
No, it did Boston, Boston and Washington, because that was the famous. The Kennedys went to see
Oh,
it
right.
during the tryouts. There's a picture of them coming out from the show.
Oh, and we also do, and we've actually been doing this for a long time. There's a pseudo campaign song called Once Every 4 Years.
Yeah.
Which was probably in the show just a filler. But one of the things we have done in our
Oh, actually, it was dropped in Boston.
Poor Joe.
No, once every 4 years.
Oh, so Once Every 4 Years. So we're doing that one, and that too had been dropped. But across the whole series, Irving Berlin was a bit of an activist as far as politics were concerned. And in the early days, you ended up having campaign songs that basically everyone had them, and he started writing them. Well, he continued to write them his entire career, right up through "Call Me Madam." And
Sorry about that.
He wrote "I Like Ike," and it was for the show. But of course, then what happened was it became Ike's campaign song. And then when Ike ran for a second term, he wrote again. He wrote Ike for 4 more years.
Yes, and then he also wrote "I Still Like Ike."
And it wrote "I Still Like Ike." So he remained politically active musically, right up through
Yeah, he wrote
Eisenhower.
He wrote a campaign song for Al Smith. He wrote one for Jimmy Walker. Who else did we do? We you know, he published these things too, so that it's not, well, I won't say it's not hard to find them, but they are out there because he published them. So
They were recorded by professional people?
not that we know of.
That's exactly right. I don't think they were, some of them were recorded, but I'm not sure by professional. One of the songs we're doing on this recording, and he decided to publish it. He was really enamored. If you happen to know the beginning of Louisiana Purchase,
Oh, right.
he does that extended number about telling you what the story is about. It's a narrative type number,
Saying that it's all fiction.
right? And so he loved doing those types of musical narratives. And for when Eisenhower ran for re-election, he wrote a song that is a narrative about Eisenhower's career and running again for president. And in it, he quotes "I Like Ike," but he sang it at
some sort of campaign event,
right?
And so it wasn't. And he didn't publish it. We got a copy.
No, he published it.
He did publish it.
He did. He published it. For whatever reason, I don't know who he thought would buy this, because it's sort of
he
lengthy.
Knew that we would eventually,
right? Lengthy and you know, it isn't a traditional song. There's nothing, you know, the tune isn't particularly attractive. I mean, it's a stage number, and he published it, and we got our hands on it. So that's one of the songs we're including on the recording. Because no one's done it. And to our knowledge, there is no recording of him doing it. So we're going to put our stamp on it.
Tell us about his appearing in shows to help in the First World War and the Second World War.
So hold on.
So he actually appeared.
That was written for TV. No.
That's We Still Like Ike.
I Still Like Ike. It was for the White House Correspondents' Dinner in March of 1954.
Right.
So it was just a little number he sang at the dinner.
But so no, he sang live in 3 shows. He was a featured performer in the first Music Box Review.
Yeah.
And then so that would have been in 1921. But then prior to that, he had been a featured performer in Yip Yip Yap Hank. That's the World War I show. And he would have done that not only because not only to put himself on the stage, but because it was the entire Army unit performing.
Yeah, he started out as a singing waiter. So he as a kid, I mean, he was like 14 or 15. And when he got older, he did do things in vaudeville, and he was one of those people that was planted in the audience to jump up and demand a song or start singing it. They would plant people as a way of selling songs or getting interest in songs going, and he did a lot of that. So he was, by the time of Yip Yip Yap Hank, he was used to being on stage and performing his own and other people's songs.
And so what he did, he wrote the score, and his, as he admitted, his one truly autobiographical song, because he was an insomniac, was "Oh, How I Hate to Get Up in the Morning."
Yes, he said, I've written very few autobiographical songs, but this one truly comes from the heart.
And so he wrote himself a little star turn in Yip Yip Yap Hank. And then because he wanted, that was in 1918 and 1921, he built and produced the theater, and then produced the first Music Box Review. And he wanted that to be a success. So he was in that show as well.
But only in the finale, right? The interview.
Right.
He only was in one number, but it's the 8 little notes as reporters come to interview him. And he sings snippets of a number of songs that he had written before the Music Box Review. And we recorded it. We're the only people I think who've ever performed it since then, let alone made a recording.
Right, with the 8 little notes that we came up with.
It's a cute routine.
And then, of course, he came back and he reprised "Oh How I Hate to Get Up in the Morning" in his World War II show, "This Is the Army,"
which also was made a movie with the same title. It was not really what they were going around doing.
It was Hollywood.
It was Hollywood. But he sings "Oh How I Hate to Get Up in the Morning." Yeah, they did. And "Oh How I Hate to Get Up in the Morning" is in it with him singing it. And I like to say that film features a future president and a future U.S. senator, and see how many people know who they both were.
Yeah, they get the press then. It's the senator that they falter on. But it, you know, as an historic document, the film itself, it's fine. It's entertaining. It's meant to be entertaining. It's a period piece. It has Rosemary Van Camp, who we really love. You know, it's got great songs in it, and we get to see how they were more or less performed on stage. And then we get to see Irving Berlin do his song, and they basically just put the camera on him and he sings.
Yeah.
And so if anything, it's an historic document, and we love that.
Now, the World War II, he actually took that to Europe. He did not do the...
He took it to all the theaters of war. It went to Europe, and was up and down Italy. And then after, well, actually, he took it to the Philippines and the South Pacific. And I think he was there after VE Day, but I think he was there before too. But he made sure it went across the U.S. and then went to the various theaters of war where U.S. troops were involved.
Right.
That was his goal.
So it was in both Europe, and it was in the what they call the theater of the Pacific.
Yeah, yeah.
But did the first Yip Yap, did that go overseas?
That played at the camp on Long Island, Camp Upton, and then it transferred into Manhattan, where it actually moved once while it was in Manhattan, played in 2 different theaters. And the finale was, we're on our way to France, and the boys would march down the aisles as if they were leaving, and they got called up. And at the last performance, not only did they march down the aisles, but they got on the buses that were taking them to the Brooklyn Navy Yard. And it's reproduced in the film Alexander's Ragtime Band, somewhat fictionalized, but that is what really happened. That's how the show closed.
Now, after Mr. President, did he stop writing? He lived.
No.
He continued to write songs and poetry, and pretty much up until he died. But his last published song is 1971. It's called "The Song of the UN," because he was a big supporter of the United Nations. And we're recording that one too. It's one of his pseudo-patriotic numbers in the style of "God Bless America."
Yeah, but nowhere near as good.
And not as good. So it's an interesting curiosity and rarity.
And he was writing. It really was more like writing poetry than songs, because he wasn't putting down much music. And actually, I'm not sure. I don't think he had anyone come in to transcribe it for him. So he wasn't doing the music. And he started painting as a way to spend his time. And then when he got much older, he kind of spent his time overlooking his catalog, taking care of his catalog, all from home. He was constantly on the phone with people, and just making sure that by his standards, everything was safe. And it's that people talk about him being nasty in his old age. I think cranky is probably a better word.
Maybe a curmudgeon.
A curmudgeon, yeah. But if you think about it, his songs were his children, as much as his biological children were. And he'd always been his own PR person. He'd always been in charge of his own business. I think just as he got older, he got a little more tight-fisted with it.
Well,
I think it makes sense.
But he also, he in certain biographies they misinterpret that curmudgeonly behavior.
Yeah.
And he still was giving to charities, Jewish,
particularly Jewish,
particularly Jewish causes.
But he felt the world had passed him by,
which it pretty much had, and he wanted, as Ben said, to protect his children, and they were his legacy. And so there are many stories of people being on the phone with him, and he was a tough negotiator. Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with being a tough negotiator. It's his property. He can do what he wants with it.
Yeah.
And I don't begrudge him that.
No.
Tell us about the movie Say It With Music.
Oh, 1963. It was originally supposed to be Julie Andrews.
Believe it or not.
There were at least 6, there may have been 10 songs that got written for that.
We've got some of them, don't we?
And we have the whole lot. Okay. And we'll be including those on this recording. But some of them have also come out and been performed. So we're not the only ones to have those songs in the collection. It's just not many people perform them. We're doing one of the 10
best undressed women in the world
is one of them. And outside of that, I Like You.
Yeah.
And they're lovely songs.
Yeah, they are, and it's quite a few here.
But he was also going to include his hits, right? That was all.
I think he was going to do some of those too, because he did those catalog films. He was very savvy that way. Even as late as his last movie, There's No Business Like Show Business, he's putting things in that came from the teens. The Midnight Choo Choo Leaves for Alabama. So he was always finding ways to keep his songs in front of the public.
And he also, in the late 50s and early 60s, as there was a proposed TV special that was going to be created. And not only did he want the content of the TV special itself to be all his songs, but he had this idea that he would write commercial lyrics to some of the songs that already existed. So all of a sudden,
it's new lyrics for commercials.
Right.
And so there's a Ford commercial, for instance.
Right. And so what would happen, he'd take a song he wrote in the 20s called Lady of the Evening and change the lyrics to sell the latest Chevrolet.
Yeah.
And he did
There's an RCA.
There's an RCA. There's a Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
The Coca-Cola commercial is set to Everybody's Step.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And they're just very, very clever. But by adding lyrics to commercials that were going to be included during the hour, it meant that not only was the hour-long special going to be Irving Berlin, but it meant that the commercial songs were also all going to be Irving Berlin. It's very clever way to do it.
Yeah.
Have any of those songs been recorded?
No,
but we've got 4 of them that we're planning to do. They'll just sort of be slipped in between a couple of songs because they're only
30 seconds
at
long.
the most 30 seconds long. Yeah.
I mean, there are commercial jingles, so it's sort of like you get the main tune and then the voice breaks off and says, "Buy your Chevrolet." I mean, so you get like 2 lines.
Yeah.
During his lifetime, did he let anybody take a song and make it into a semi-commercial?
No, he did not. And there's a famous story that has a word that we can't use for a family show.
It was for Miss Clairol.
Miss Clairol wanted to use always, and apparently it was going to be something like "I'll be holding you always"
for their hairspray.
For their hairspray, and he said, "I'm not letting my song be used in some expletive hairspray commercial and slam down the phone.
And they were going to offer him like $1 million.
Oh yeah, they're going to offer him a huge amount of money.
And he said, I don't care.
And then wasn't there somebody who he was 90 something and they called up and they wanted to use one of his songs, and he said, no, you can't have it. I've got plans for that song.
It was for Blue Skies.
Yeah, Blue Skies.
And he hung up the phone.
Yes, yeah, he was famous for hanging up the phone on people.
But when you're Irving Berlin and you're over 90, you're allowed to do
you're
what
allowed
you
to do
want.
that. So.
He lived, what was his final age?
101.
Yeah.
Died peacefully in his sleep?
He did. And it was time. The last few years really were not happy ones for him because he was frail. And as we say, he felt the world had passed him by.
And his wife, Ellen, had died.
Yeah, his wife died. And he became very reclusive, which is understandable. He couldn't really get out. So it's
he still has
not the best end, but
he still has 2 daughters who are alive, and
yeah, the older 2 daughters are still alive, and we are in touch with them periodically. We just had an email from Mary Ellen, the oldest, and she said, I can say the same thing my father used to say, from the neck up, I'm doing well. And the middle daughter, Linda, lives in Paris, and we've had contact. We've met both of them, and it's just the ironies of life. Elizabeth, the youngest, was quite a bit younger, was the first to die, but she was probably in her 80s at that point. In any case, but this longevity seems to be in that family.
Yes.
isn't there a biography by the 2 remaining?
Mary Ellen wrote a memoir about her parents, in many ways, and it's called A Daughter's Memoir of Irving Berlin, but she talks a lot about her mother, who frankly is an equally fascinating character to Irving Berlin. And one of her granddaughters described her as a wonderful lady who wore 3 strings of pearls even in the country and had long cigarette holders. So, but I think I would have liked to have met her as much as I would have liked to have met him.
What year would you say the biography of him came out?
Well, Mary Ellen's came out in the late 90s, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Around the same time, we like to say if you want there are 3 books if you want a good perspective on Irving Berlin. One is that Ed Jablonski wrote his biography in the late half of the 90s.
Yeah.
And then Mary Ellen's memoir. And if you combine those 2 books, you get a sense of the person. And then the 3rd book, and since Ben won't say it, I'll say it, or he might not say it, is he put together an Irving Berlin reader for Oxford University Press, which talks about a lot of stories around Irving Berlin and some of the anecdotes, and goes into a little more detail. And you find out that sometimes that the way Irving Berlin spun his own stories weren't totally accurate, and it doesn't destroy anything.
And the daughters were very nice. They said, go ahead and put in the nasty stuff too, in terms of people who didn't like him. And I did find some columns where people were being less than complimentary about him. And I did not, there was somebody did a piece years ago about God Bless America and This Land Is Your Land by Woody Guthrie, which was pretty long, so I didn't use that. But the piece was sort of, trying to boost Guthrie at the expense of Berlin, which I don't think was entirely fair, but it certainly was an interesting point of view. And apparently Guthrie really did write that song as a response to God Bless America, which I think he thought was bit sappy. And yeah, you could say that, I guess.
Well, and I mean, if that's the case, they have both survived on their own merits.
Exactly.
Kate Smith was the one who really kept singing God Bless America.
Yeah, she introduced it. He had written it as the finale for Yip Yip Yap Hank.
In a slightly different form.
Yeah, and we got our hands on it, and we did a production of Yip Yip, a concert production of Yip Yip Yap Hank, and we did include the original version. The lyrics are not that much different. The tune is actually quite different in a lot of places. It was a little jarring at first learning it because it wasn't going at all where you thought it was going to go. Berlin was an inveterate recycler often of just ideas, but he did rewrite songs. It's not well known, for instance, that Mandy, which is in the film White Christmas, was a rewrite of something he'd written for Yip Yip Yap Hank called The Sterling Silver Moon. And the second version is better, there's no question, but The Sterling Silver Moon is a charming song. And he wrote, he wrote a number of songs about the devil and the teens, which culminated in the Music Box reviews with Pack Up Your Sins and Go to the Devil, which is also in the movie Alexander's Ragtime Band. So it's no surprise that he thought of God Bless America when Kate came to him and said she wanted a song, and he made some changes, and she sang it on Thanksgiving Eve, and as they cornily say, the rest is history. And it was the right song at the right time too, I think.
Are you aware of the story about Ethel Waters and As Thousands Cheer?
The Bows? Yes, oh, definitely. And he was very good that way. It's 1919, right? Ziegfeld Follies.
Yeah.
He wrote a song called "There's a Little Corner of Heaven."
A little corner up in heaven.
Yeah. And what it was it was saying that blacks go to the same heaven that whites do, and people were outraged.
Yeah, they were really scandalized. I mean, the language of the song is
of its time.
It's not, you have to put that perspective on it. But the overall message of the song was that everyone's going to the same place, and people just didn't want to hear that. The white people didn't want to hear that.
Right. So he was ahead on that. He was, I think, well, certainly for the Second World War, he was aware of what was going on in Europe well before most Americans, including some of our politicians, really knew what was going on. And he wrote a couple of songs, I think,
as far back as like 38
or 37,
yeah,
talking about Hitler and how bad this was for the world. So he was in tune with a lot of stuff. And in fact, in my book, I have a thing in Holiday Inn, in the song Abraham, he used the word darky, and it's in the film still. And he published it that way. And a black newspaper in the South wrote an editorial saying, that's not the best word, Irving. And he pulled all the copies and had it changed to, I think, black folk.
Yeah.
So he was sensitive to these things, and he was, he just, that was the word people used in those days, and so he did. But as I say, when he found out about it, he was more than happy to make a change that was going to be less offensive.
Tell us about the curtain call and Ethel Waters.
Well, her fellow performers didn't want to take a curtain call with a black singer, and he said, "Fine, we won't have a show." And suddenly they were willing to bow with her.
That's right. I mean, the details are a little more dramatic even, because he was serious when he said, we're not going to have a show.
It's my football, and if I take it, you can't play.
Right.
So,
and he would have stopped the performance if they had not taken the bow with her. And of course, the grand irony is that she really came out of that as perhaps the major star of the show.
Yeah, and it's probably Supper Time, which was her song, which is maybe the best remembered.
That's right.
From that show. Well, Easter Parade, obviously. But,
right. Easter Parade is the big one.
Yeah.
But she did Harlem on My Mind. She did at Supper Time, and she had one other, and they were all really good.
Yeah, yeah.
But did Clifton Webb ever record any? He was in a number of musicals, yet I don't know that I've ever heard him sing.
You know, I have no idea. That's a really interesting question.
Libby Holman certainly would have sung.
Oh yeah, she recorded, but I have no idea if he made any recordings. You'd think he did somewhere, but who knows? I mean, you know, they didn't have cast recordings in those days, and so what often happened was that one or two people from the show would record a lot of songs from it, even though they weren't the ones they sang. And that kept going right up into the 40s, that sort of thing where, you know, Ethel Merman would be in a show and she'd record half the songs and not necessarily had sung them all in the whatever the show was.
But in England, they had a more tradition of at least doing the songs that were Fred Astaire and Adele recorded in London. They did not record.
I don't think, did Adele ever record here? I don't think she did.
Yeah, I don't think she ever recorded on this side.
Those are delightful recordings. And there's a couple that George Gershwin is playing as the accompanist, which is
we did
pretty
one,
amazing.
We did one of the songs in our show and on our Fred and Ethel recording, I'd Rather Charleston.
Yeah.
And in the original, it was George playing and Fred and Adele doing the singing and dancing and sort of dialogue. And it was, it's a delight.
And then one of the, that's our clock. One of the numbers, Fred does tap, and he starts tapping and you hear him say, "How's that, Georgie?" And from the distance you hear, "Great work, Freddie," or something to that effect. It's really fun to have that now, you know. It's a bit of history.
Talk a little about Irving Berlin's piano.
Well, you know, one of the things that we found out, and I certainly found out when I was researching my book, these pianos actually were not that unusual. We always hear about the transposing piano in relation to Irving Berlin, but a lot of people played predominantly on the black keys, the key of F sharp. And as someone pointed out, they didn't play only on the black keys, because if Berlin had, all his songs would have sounded like Debussy. But what it was that there was a lever underneath, and you could use it and move the keyboard. So when you wanted to change keys, you just shifted it to the proper place. And he always referred to his as a Buick because it had a stick shift. And he had a number of these pianos in various places. So and if you go to the Smithsonian, that is an Irving Berlin piano, but it's not the Irving Berlin piano, as it were. And he never progressed beyond playing an F sharp. What is fun about these is he had a musical secretary who would take down what he was playing, and Berlin would play it in F sharp. The transcriber would write it out in C major, which is no sharps and no flats. And then after they came to agreement on what the song was, and Berlin decided he did want to publish it, they'd figure out what key they wanted to publish it in. So most of these songs had 3 keys by the time they got into the hands of the public.
And what's interesting about that is that some of the songs that we've done over the years I transposed them to the key of F sharp or G flat, whatever you want to call it, and found that it's easier to play. They're all much easier to play in the original key.
Because you have more space
Right.
when you're playing the black keys. That's why they did it.
They fit under the hands a little more idiomatically.
Yeah.
And again, as Ben said, they go from F sharp to C, and then in some cases to E flat or D. And so by that time, the fingerings, you know, you have to think about what the fingering is going to be, where in the original key, they sort of rest under the hands.
Yeah, and that wasn't his problem because he couldn't play in those
Right,
keys.
didn't make
So
any
what did he care?
And it didn't make any difference to the song. They're all good songs.
Right, right.
How many songs has he written? Is there a definitive number?
Oh, no.
No, there is not a definitive number, but
Is there a range?
certainly
I mean,
more than 1,000. It's somewhere, you know, I'd say 1,000, 1,100, something in that range. And of
Yeah,
course,
with Irving Berlin, it gets tricky because
because he threw out more songs than he kept.
right, and then also we were talking about these commercial jingles that never got done. Is that considered a song? Actually, it is a song. I mean, you can sing it, but it was never published. So, you know, you're talking about he published probably over 1,000, and then you have to add on top of that all the unpublished material.
Yeah.
And there you get into the 1,100, 1,200 range.
Yeah, yeah. And as I say, he always said, I throw out more songs than I keep. So, you know, we have no idea how much stuff there was there, and it may still be possible that, you know, after his daughters die and more stuff is cleared out, they're going to find sketches or something in boxes. So who knows? You know, it's hard to say. But
yeah, it's an ongoing process.
He certainly was prolific, and he had this ability, certainly in his early and middle years, in his prime, definitely, of just being able to churn them out, and good songs. One of the things that we found so interesting in this sort of period of roughly 1925 through 1945, when we were recording these things, we were constantly saying, how could the same man have written these songs? His scope was just astonishing. And you know, people say, you know, what was Irving Berlin's style, or Alec Wilder couldn't pin it down. And I think the thing with Berlin is its deceptive simplicity. His songs don't sound complicated or sophisticated particularly, and certainly musically adventurous when you're listening to them. But then you start working on them, and what's the one, every time we do it, I say, how did he get into that key? He does this modulation that just shouldn't happen, and it does, and it sounds like it could only be that. But, you know, if Bach saw that, he'd pass out, because it's just a different world.
Well, he does that in I Used to Be Colorblind, that he goes into that key for about 4 bars, and then he finds his way back.
Yeah. And he was not necessarily writing, you know, traditional AABA songs. Cheek to Cheek wanders all over the place. But when you're listening to it, you're not really noticing that. So he was, you know, for someone who was untutored, clearly he had an incredible ear and an incredible ability to absorb what he was hearing around him. And he went to the opera a lot. He loved opera. So a lot of his early songs make references to opera or parodies of operas. So he was, you know, when he was doing things adventurously, harmonically, it came from a place that he knew. It wasn't just this duffer saying, "Oh, I like that," you know. So he knew his stuff, even if he didn't realize he knew it. Put it that way, I think.
Yeah.
You recorded sort of a fundraiser of Watch Your Step.
Well, we've done with our nonprofit. We have a small nonprofit called American Classics, and we put together a stage concert production of Watch Your Step back in
2000.
was it
It was for the 100th anniversary, wasn't it?
was it
No. The first one was not.
right. It was back in the aughts
Yeah.
somewhere.
Yeah.
And then we revived that in for the 100th anniversary in 2014. And the score there is the first published score, total published score of any Broadway show. It has that. It also has Simple Melody in it, which is one of his most recognizable and famous songs. But it's also got an absolutely, I mean, truly delightful score. It featured the Castles, Vernon and Irene. And when we redid it in 2014, the problem with doing Watch Your Step is the script. The original script in total is lost. You've got parts of it, and then you've got the first part of it from.
We've got Act 1, which we're pretty sure is basically the opening night, Act 1.
Right.
But every time somebody left the show, they rewrote it to fit the new performer. And a lot of the show was written very specifically for the people in it, including some of the songs. There's a song in Act 1 called I'm a Dancing Teacher Now that Vernon Castle sang, and it's got nothing to do with the plot. It's a song about Vernon Castle.
And he went back and forth.
And it's a charming song, so you want to do it, but you can't explain to people why it's there.
Right. It's difficult to explain to modern audiences in this era of the integrated musical.
Yeah.
That in fact, what they would do in 1914, it was halfway between a book musical and a review, and characters in the show would occasionally step out of their character and just say, "Hi, I'm Vernon Castle," and then do a song and then go back into the show.
Yeah.
And so they were just entertaining people. Plus the script, I think we had 3 different pieces of the script.
It's hard to know.
And one of them had a lengthy scene with no songs in it. A lengthy scene which dealt with the 1914 actors strike. And it just isn't funny because we don't have the context for it. And plus the original characters would have ad-libbed a lot during that particular scene, which would have gotten the audience going. So, we didn't include that, but the one of the real discoveries and the gems in that particular score is that Irving Berlin always liked to play the part of being a simple, uneducated songwriter. But in fact, he, especially in those early years, was a sponge. And he loved to sneak off and go to the Metropolitan Opera because he liked opera. And in 1914, it really was one of the main cultural one of the main ways to the pieces of musical culture.
Yeah, and it was interesting. I mean, we get into sociology. The rich people were going and sitting in their boxes, but a lot of the Italians, immigrant or first generation, would go because they did a lot of Italian opera. So you had this very interesting mixture of people in the audiences at the Met and the Manhattan Opera Company and some of the others too.
And so he did this delicious, for the end of the second act, delicious opera medley, taking some of the most famous opera arias, choruses, ensembles.
Yeah, we get the Toreador song from Carmen, we get Musetta's Waltz from Bohème, we get a bit of the quartet from Rigoletto. Aida is in there, complete with the key change in the triumphal scene.
And it's really a lot of fun.
And the ghost of Verdi comes in and says, "Please don't rag my opera."
And of course, Verdi loses.
Yes.
And also in that particular scene in 1914, it was the Diamond Horseshoe. Those were the boxes. They had installed telephones into the boxes so that while the opera was going on, those who were rich enough to pay for those boxes could actually call people up on their telephone.
Well, within the opera house, I think. I don't think they could call out.
Right. And so they would sit and chat with their friends while the opera was going on. So there's a little scene of that, which is great fun. And then
Yes. So one of the women says, oh, that's not Mrs. So-and-so, that's her maid, but she wanted her jewels to go to the opera. So she let her maid wear them.
right. And then that's the end of the second act. And the opening of the third act, it starts the entr'acte starts with a quote from Wagner's Tristan. And that ends up morphing, if you can believe it, into what ended up being one of the hits of the show of the time of Settle Down in a One-Horse Town.
Yeah.
So you have Tristan going into Settle Down in a One-Horse Town. And you sort of, it was great to do the show because there are quite a few people who know that opera medley. They know it exists, they've done it, but then they don't know that the entr'acte actually continues that parody going into the third act. And so it was fun to do that.
Yeah, to get back to your question, we always record a performance just for our own documentation, but we have taken some of them, particularly ones out of copyright, and made CDs that are for fundraisers. So it's Watch Your Step is one of them. His second show, Stop, Look, Listen. The first time we did Yip Yip Yap Hank, we used that. So we have taken a few of the Berlin things and a couple of others that we've done, and do use them as fundraising items, and people buy them, they like them. So
can they go to
it
your
works.
can they go to your website and buy them?
Yeah, if they go to actually those, they would go to American Classics website, which is our nonprofit group.
AmericanClassics.org.
Yeah, but if they went to benandbrad.com, there would be a link to that. So either way, you can find our CDs.
Yeah, if you start with benandbrad.com, you'll find most of our recordings. And then for those, it has that we're attached or producers of American Classics, and there's a link to jump over to AmericanClassics.org to get those show recordings.
I was surprised to find that when Watch Your Step was done, it was not traditional to have one person write the score. And if he said, I will write this, but I will be, and that was.
Yeah, it was the first time that Tin Pan Alley went uptown. And it was the first time that someone wrote the whole score. He had a bit of a precedent because he wrote well over half of the score for the 1919 Ziegfeld Follies. So, he would have been viewed as someone who potentially could do that. But that was groundbreaking, and it's something people forget. I mean, even show music historians, Broadway historians aren't really aware of that or the significance of it, put it that way.
Well, I'm going to correct Ben on this because he said that, so Watch Your Step was written in 1914 and the Ziegfeld Follies was 5 years later.
That's right.
So anyway, that's not a precedent.
But he had written a lot for 1910. That's what I should have said.
Yeah. That works a little better.
Okay, sorry about that. You'll have to edit that out.
That's a little confusing. But also the scores. We have to keep in mind that what would happen. There were two types of shows on Broadway at the time. The highbrow, as such as it was, were operettas. Those scores were basically written by one composer. The Tin Pan Alley tended to be, as I said earlier, review type scores. So a little of this, a little of that, etc. And then, of course, I think it was Dillingham who asked him to do Watch Your Step.
Yeah,
he wanted to do the whole score. And then again, it was the first time the entire score was published as a single score.
It was also an era where songs were interpolated, and so if you were a young songwriter, you tried to get your song put into somebody else's show,
right?
Which is, for instance, how Kern finally got noticed, They Wouldn't Believe Me. That was it, right?
I believe
Yeah. And that was very common. So the idea that shows weren't written by one composer was hardly an oddity.
Now, have you never recorded Richard Rodgers? That would seem to be.
Oh no. Well, we have talking about going to AmericanClassics.org. We have not done a recording.
We haven't done a studio recording.
We've done a lot of Rodgers. We've done a lot of Rodgers and Hart and Hammerstein.
Yeah.
But what we did with American Classics was we did a show, and we've done a lot of the early Rodgers and Hart shows. But we did a show of Rodgers and Hart's rarities, and including things like Hart wrote lyrics for production of The Merry Widow.
Yeah, that show, that was all Hart.
Yeah.
And we put in the Merry Widow translation that he did, the film for Jeanette MacDonald and Maurice Chevalier. And we found some unusual songs along with the stuff you'd expect. So it was
some in manuscript,
yeah,
some published.
But we did our own show, our own concert of Richard Rodgers for his centenary, which was 2001. And so we had songs he'd written with both Hart and Hammerstein, and some of the ones he wrote after Hammerstein died. And what we really came away with after that show was just enormous respect for Richard Rodgers. Not that we didn't respect him already, but just being able to live with his music for a while gave us a new perspective on just what a great songwriter he is.
And how he kept evolving.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. He really was putting new ideas into his songs and his music.
Yeah.
Right up to the end. He didn't necessarily just rest on his laurels.
No, he did not.
He really wanted to keep creating.
Yeah.
And I did a Zoom with Peter Melnick. He had two grandsons, Peter Melnick and Adam Gettle.
Right.
Gettle, people know, but Peter Melnick wrote things, and he really lived to write musicals.
Yes.
And although he was in terrible health, he had his part of his throat removed, or
No, part of his jaw. He had
so he was in pain, and yet he persevered.
Yeah.
It was inconceivable, and yet he wasn't that old when he died. I mean, I'm 80 years old, and he was in his 70s.
He was in his 70s. Yeah. Well, one of the things that is interesting, he was just so facile at composing. I mean, sort of like Mozart. It just flowed out of him. You know, when he was writing with Hart, just sometimes they were turning out songs in 10 or 15 minutes because they both were so quick at their craft.
In some years, they did 4 musicals for Broadway. Now, maybe they started some of them, but nowadays it takes like 5 years.
Yeah. No, it's extraordinary. And even after he was writing with Hammerstein, there are famous stories where Hammerstein would spend 3 or 4 days agonizing over a lyric and trying to get it just right, and he'd put it in the mail, and the next day he'd get this call from Rodgers saying, "Well, I'm done," and it always annoyed him. And Rodgers said, "Well, it's not because I'm glib. It's just because, amongst other things, we discuss what sort of a song we're going to put in what place in the musical. So I've already been thinking about it," which is true. But I think he was able to compose quickly. And it's a gift.
Which worked really well when Rodgers was paired with Hart, because Hart was equally facile at writing lyrics. So both of them could write astonishingly fast.
Yeah, but Hart wasn't as disciplined, and we know how he ended up, unfortunately.
Right.
told that Rogers tried to write with Lerner. It sort of made sense that they had
Oh,
each lost their partner,
Oh,
and
God.
yet
I think that was not a good marriage, as
No,
it
that
were.
was a mistake. And Rogers, I think it was Rogers who walked out of the project because he was just so annoyed at Lerner's inability to say this is my final answer. He was just constantly fiddling with songs, and Rogers wanted to get on with it. And it certainly isn't fascinating of what that pairing could have been if they could have found a way to work together.
but according to Peter,
Because certainly,
they did not write any songs. He said they invited Lerner to come to dinner with Dorothy,
yeah,
and Dorothy was very righteous, or she knew how she wanted the dinner party to go, and people should get there an hour or so. So it took 3 days before Lerner finally came. He said, "I'm coming. I'm not coming. I'm taking a boat to
Yeah.
Long Island. I'm taking."
yeah,
So
yeah,
they
that sounds
kind
right.
of knew that there was, but they had a title. The title was "I Picked a Daisy." So I'd like to believe that Rogers would at least thought of a melody for "I Picked a Daisy."
Yeah, no, as far as I know, they did not complete anything. And as I say, I think it would have been fascinating to hear what they would have come up with, because certainly Lerner at his best is one of the best. There's no question of that.
But he was also one of the most unfocused.
Yes.
So,
We're still waiting for a really definitive biography of Alan J. Lerner, which sooner or later will happen, I'm sure. But I'm not going to do it.
Are you familiar with? I just learned of a interesting gentleman from England, from Sheffield University, Dominic McHugh.
Yeah,
he's a friend of ours.
He is a friend of ours. I've had contact with him for a number of years now, and he did a book on My Fair Lady, and he did a book on Lerner's letters, collection of Lerner's letters. And actually, you get a lot of good biographical information on the book on the letters. And then he and Amy Ash did a complete lyrics book, which is very good. Some great information on the shows. A couple of them, I mean, what's the one on oh God, that the book about Humboldt? Oh shoot!
I have no idea where you're going.
No,
with this.
it's a Russian novel that is so scandalous, and it's sort of like, why would you make a musical out of this? But he tried. Lolita, yes,
Right, is
yes,
Lolita.
yes.
I love
Lolita.
Lolita.
Well, I've never read Lolita, and I have to tell you, after reading what they wrote about it in between the songs, I said, I never want to read it. I know enough about it now that I just don't need that in my life. And how it's not something that's going to be musicalized.
But there are indeed wonderful songs. There's a song,
Yeah,
like, The
of
Broken
course.
Promised Land of 15. And to me,
Yeah,
it's not about sex, it's about loving. That one can love someone and
yeah,
not. That
yeah. But
Humbert
there just seem to be.
loved Lolita, and he would have been
Yes.
happy he was happy he married her mother so he could be in Lolita's life.
Yeah, yeah.
But,
Well,
people look at the other part of it, and there was sex, and that, of course, can't be done.
yeah, but there were
people-
some other things that I seem to remember were kind of ugly incidents in the book that just it didn't enthuse me.
The York Theater did it in the last couple of years.
Oh,
And
good.
the last idea that Lerner had is that to show he was guilty about this, that he didn't feel that the way things happened. So he's a psychiatrist and trying to explain. He goes to a psychiatrist to explain all that. And but are you aware of Writing with Coleman? That'd be
No.
called- There are some songs.
Very interesting. Oh,
Whatever.
wow.
This is in the very last days,
Yeah.
1943, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, it would be 43. That's interesting. I don't think I knew that. That's
And that, you know,
something.
Rogers
Not
really did,
something we've explored.
Rogers did Connecticut Yankee
Yeah,
to sort of invigorate. Of course, the last song he wrote was maybe one of the greatest lyrics
that's
ever
right.
written.
Yes.
to keep my love alive, and he kept.
Say that and The Physician are two of the funniest songs ever written, and brilliant, just brilliant.
And they're both list songs, and they're both torturous to memorize.
Yeah, we it was To Keep My Love Alive. We went to see Rita Moreno, and she did it, and we know the song very well. We started laughing before the punchlines, and she turned around and glared at us.
But she said somebody is laughing and spoiling this, and so we had to shut up.
It was funny, but and I don't blame her. You know, it's her show, not ours. Oh.
Did she do this with an orchestra or a piano?
She did it.
She had an ensemble.
She had an ensemble. It was at Sculler's.
A jazz club.
A jazz club here in Boston.
So she had 3 or 4 pieces behind her.
Yeah, and did 3 or 4 sold out shows, and
Yeah.
we were lucky enough to have tickets.
Yeah.
She was in a musical that closed opening night, which I saw, and it wasn't good. It was about an evangelist, and it was sort of based on Elmer Gantry, but it wasn't. It was called, what was it? I forget the name of it, but it closed opening night, and it played Boston, so you could have seen this.
Yeah. No, I have no recollection at all about that.
No, it was called Gantry. I'm sorry, it was called.
Oh, okay.
Gantry.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard of it, definitely.
Robert Shaw, not a singer, but was
Right.
I think Richard Harrison, Rex Harrison, started a tradition.
Yes.
And then everybody who could talk, the worst performer I ever saw was Arthur Hill. And he's paired with Barbara Cook and something more.
Oh.
And there wasn't anything more. And he could not carry a tune. I mean, he was hopelessly,
Yeah.
There's a wonderful song that Barbara Cook sings, of course, called Better All the Time. It's Sammy Fain or Julie Stein was involved. So it might have been Julie Stein who says, I have a good song for Barbara.
Yeah.
And it's her only Broadway show that was never recorded. And to my knowledge, she never sang any songs. I would have, if I had one good song, I would say, well, the show was a stinker, but here's a song that's not a stinker. One of the lyrics is it's the Bergmans, who didn't have much luck on Broadway. But the song about look what tumbles after, was a phrase that I thought was just so beautiful that it gets better all the time. We've had our ups and downs.
I wonder if it was just such a bad experience she didn't want to do anything from it. Who knows?
I think it was. They had a deal to record it, but when it closed in a couple of weeks, that never happened.
Right.
Have you seen her perform in concert when she?
Yes, we went. We went quite often
times, right?
To see her here in Boston.
If not 3 times.
Yeah. She did a show at Sanders Theater, the concert hall that's at Harvard, and we were having a pretty serious snowstorm, and it was a full house. And the look on her face when she came out and saw that it was a full house in that weather was worth the price of admission right there.
We live in Boston. Snow,
yes,
it doesn't bother us.
Snow doesn't slow us down.
But you didn't get
her.
I was afraid that we'd have trouble zooming because here we got another 6 or 8 inches. You didn't get 6 or 8 inches?
we're getting the outer edge of all of these things.
So ours
So-
is only like 4 to 8 inches.
If that, I
Right.
mean, it's hardly anything out there. It's about half an inch, and that's been going since midnight or something.
Well, no, it started yesterday afternoon.
That's right.
and but it's been a very light, constant snow ever since then. But it'll be 4 to 8 inches at most.
Yeah, but it also depends. Even in Massachusetts, it depends on where you are, because one friend who lives, I don't know, 25, 30 miles west of Boston, the last storm he got something like 15 inches, and we maybe got 2. Now, of course, we're on the coast, so that makes a difference. But it seems like, when we look at the weather report, that we're on the outer edge of all these storms, and places like DC are getting whomped by it. So who knows?
Yeah, I mean, it's been our big snow season was 2015.
Yeah.
And that was over 100 inches. And we kept getting walloped with blizzards on a schedule of once a week, anywhere from 1 to 2 feet of snow.
Yeah.
And it was like, we get through with one, we unbury ourselves, and all of a sudden they'd say, oh, and here comes another one.
Yeah.
And we got well over 100 inches. We got more snow than Alaska.
And we could
did
sing
that year.
snow, 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 snow.
It won't be long before we'll all be there with snow.
But we're getting sidetracked.
Yeah. And back to Irving, Berlin.
Yeah.
Did you see Holiday Inn on Broadway?
Yes.
There's
We saw it opening night at
Goodspeed.
Goodspeed.
Yes.
And enjoyed it very much. And then we saw it on TV, the Broadway on TV, and they had made some changes, I think, for the better. But it was charming. They turned it into a stage piece, so they had to make changes. We were not that thrilled with the first version of White Christmas. But again, they made some changes in that.
And it's gotten better, yeah.
Yeah, and we did see a company in England did a stage production of Top Hat, which we saw when we were over there one summer, and loved it. I thought they did a really great job of transferring it to the stage without doing damage to the story. I mean, sometimes I think the first White Christmas kind of took away from what makes the movie story work, and they went too far away from that. This Top Hat did not, but it was not, what's the word I want? I mean, it wasn't sort of the glitzy thing that the New York producers wanted, so it never got
slick.
Yeah, it wasn't slick enough. So it never transferred over here, which I think is too bad, but they did make a recording of it, which is a lot of fun. And they brought in songs from other parts of his career, and they were all basically from the same period as the movie Top Hat. So it wasn't like they brought in something from 1960 that would have been a bit different in terms of the musical style, and it was fun, and
the audience loved it.
Yes, the audience loved it, and it's too bad it hasn't made its way over here, because it was a good show.
Have you ever seen Miss Liberty?
No.
The one show I don't think we've seen.
Has anyone seen Miss Liberty?
No, they did it in Goodspeed.
They did. Okay, I didn't know that. Which is good. I mean, they should be doing things like that.
I remember as a kid, because I am almost 80, they did Let's Take an Old-Fashioned Walk was a pop hit.
Yeah.
Maybe not #1, but and again,
Let's take an old-fashioned walk.
No, I knew that song had been on the hit parade. And it's a lovely song.
Well, and you also have songs like is What'll I Have to Do?
How do I get my picture?
Yeah, what'll I have to do to get my picture in the paper?
He rewrote the lyrics for that. He didn't change the tune, but he rewrote the lyrics, and he published both versions. And we actually think the first version is the better lyric of the two, and I'm not sure why he changed it. But if we ever get our last recording done, we're going to do that version.
The
of it,
earlier
the
version.
earlier version.
I thought, I love the song Only for Americans.
Yes, yes, it's cute.
I don't think anyone sings that song,
No.
but yeah, it pokes fun that only Americans are foolish enough to buy things.
Right.
We make these things, those dirty postal cards are only for Americans.
Yep. Yep. We need to bring back Fifi Dorsey to do it.
All right. And then also there's that lovely, the song about Paris.
Oh, Paris Wakes Up. Right?
Yeah, Paris Wakes Up and Smiles.
Yeah.
That's really beautiful.
Lovely song.
It
Yeah.
is. We
problem
did that a
is
couple of years ago.
The book is not very interesting. About
No. Well, how could it be? I mean, it's not a.
Wasn't it Moss Hart? I mean, it was.
Was it? I don't. Well, I can take a look here and tell you.
Sure
but it's it's not really a story that's going to appeal to the tired businessman, as they say.
Well, and it's another one. It would be great if, Encores took it under their wing, because they're not, they tend to do the music well, and they tend to revise the book if it needs revising, and
cut things
the music
out,
in that would be delightful to to perform again.
I love the song You Can Have Him.
Yes.
Women are saying, no, he's yours.
Yeah.
That could be in any musical that they're two women.
Yes, definitely.
We're almost there.
Yeah. Let's see.
Keep going.
There we go.
There we go.
There we go. Let's see.
So looking it up.
The book was by Robert E. Sherwood, but Moss Hart directed and was one of the producers. So maybe better if he had written the show too.
Well, and interestingly enough, we know we've talked to a couple of people who actually saw the original and said that the real star of the show was the scenery, and said that was the dangerous part. The scenery was memorable and gorgeous, and when the curtains would go up, people would gasp, and then the show would start.
Nowadays, you can't really do the kind of sets and costumes unless you have $20 million or something.
I know.
In those days,
it's too bad.
$300,000 or $400,000, and Viper Lady, I think, was under $300,000.
The original, or
the original, right?
Huh. It was, yeah. I mean, I know it was expensive for the time, but it certainly made its money back.
Well, did it make its money back?
Yeah.
The good thing is that Goddard Lieberson not only got Columbia to record it, he said, why don't we back the show?
Yes.
Because of that, they let him record all the short run shows. Anyone Can Whistle, The Nervous Set, shows that would not have been normally recorded. But again, it cost very little to record. I've spent more money recording flop shows than they did in those days.
Yeah.
Orchestrators got a few $1,000s now. They get more than my budget for big shows.
Yeah, that's a factor.
Yeah, but I think, what a lot of people don't understand with some of these shows, and it almost happened to Annie Get Your Gun, is that the arrangers, the orchestrators and the arrangers can kill a show. If it's not done right, then it can lead to the failure of a show, and Annie Get Your Gun's one of those that they had one orchestrator doing the show, and
he was a good one.
He was a good one, but Berlin hated.
I think, or Phil Lang. Maybe you didn't like Phil Lang.
The very first
Well, it wasn't
orchestrator,
so much that he hated it. He just felt it wasn't working.
it wasn't working. And so what happened was they said, call in Robert
Yeah, it
Russell
was
Bennett.
Philip Lang.
Right. So Lang wrote the first set of orchestrations, and Berlin didn't like them. He thought they were heavy. He said they were just leaden.
Yeah,
And
Rogers talks about it in his autobiography, and he said Berlin came to him and said, "Mr. Rogers, we have a problem." And he said, "I knew since he was calling me Mr. Rogers and not Dick, that he definitely had a problem."
and he just thought they were too heavy. And so they brought in Robert Russell Bennett to give them sparkle.
Yeah,
And of course, Bennett
worked.
did.
Yeah.
It worked. I mean, those orchestrations for that show are just brilliant.
yeah,
But it shows you how important that an arranger orchestrator can be in that in-between spot of getting the song out there.
yeah.
Phil Lang did a musical that I very much love and started to record called Lovely Ladies, Kind Gentlemen, which is Tea House of the August Moon. And I went to see the world premiere in Philadelphia, which I did. Once I moved to Connecticut, I then saw the world premiere of every show in Boston that you didn't go to see. There for Follies and Little Night Music.
Yeah.
And Pacific Overtures.
Wow.
But I went to see Lovely Ladies in Philadelphia, and I was friends with Phil Lang. He actually re-orchestrated Carmelina for me, because Herb Kay and Burton Lane did not get along. And so Phil Lang was nice enough to give me a very good price for, if he had been doing a show, he would have gotten 5-10 times as much. And
yeah.
But he said to me in Philadelphia, he said, it's never going to be like this again. There's already pressure. And eventually they toured all over the country prior to Broadway. And eventually they replaced every orchestration of Phil Lang.
Huh.
And they got Irwin Costal, and that's sort of the same as bringing Irwin Costal is a great orchestrator, but it did not.
But he is. It's like bringing in a Robert Russell Bennett.
But it did not make the show successful because Phil.
Yeah. Right. Well, there are always many factors.
There are many other factors. The book again. They talked to many people, and they said, if you give us a decent book, we'll give you good songs and we'll have a hit. If you don't give us a good book and an interesting book, the best we can do will not be good enough, and we will not have a hit.
Yeah. No, it is an interesting thing that so much rides on the book. And somewhere I saw something, if the book is good, no one really ever talks about it. But if it's bad, that's all you hear about. We are, I think now even more so because of the idea of the integrated musical. We're very aware of the quality of the book. But to hark back to something like Watch Your Step, in that era, if the score was good, it could keep going even with a creaky book, or even sort of a lack of one, which a lot of the shows had, and even some of the movies. I mean, Brad showed one of the Astaire Rogers pictures a few years ago to his choir. And people afterwards were saying, well, I loved the songs and the dances, but there really wasn't much of a plot. And we were sort of, well, of course there wasn't, but we had a different perspective on it.
Well, I think we've had a wonderful discussion, and
thank
I look
you.
very much forward. I mean, is there any projected date that you'd like to see the Berlin?
The projected date is when they tell us the pandemic is over.
I know.
It'll be like 3 months after that.
Yeah, we have to get through the pandemic so we can rent the studio and with the pull things together. So it could be as early as by the end of this year, or probably sometime in 2022.
Yeah, we talked to our engineer about about doing something, and he said, well, we could do it at your house, and we have a really good piano. Brad went to a lot of effort to get a really good piano. But, you know, there's a lot of traffic. And we said, no, you know, it really isn't feasible.
It's
because
not a recording studio.
Yeah, there'd be too much extraneous noise.
Is someone
So
near
who
the
knows?
road? Where they,
Yeah, we're on a it's a side street, but it's a very busy side street, because it gives people a way of cutting across Alston that takes them away from the main road that does that and is always clogged. So we get a fair amount of traffic on our street, and trucks. And if there's a fire on the other side of town, every fire truck goes through here.
That's right.
They always take our street to get certain places. It's not a good recording venue.
So COVID's gonna determine.
Yeah, COVID's got the upper hand on this one.
Right.
But anyhow, this has been fun.
It has
Thank
been a
you so
lot of fun.
much.
Thank you.
yes, I don't think we've ever had this long a conversation. So
No, we haven't. So this is good.
Good.
It had only taken us, what, 20 years?
yeah, we
Good.
talked at the encore luncheons and things like that.
Yeah,
Nice
yeah.
conversations there. The encore
I guess
luncheons.
Langen's is closed, right?
Yes,
Yep, it's gone.
yes.
Ugh.
Even McDonald's has closed. The big McDonald's.
In Times Square? Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
Because
Well, it's been over a year since we've been to Manhattan, so
have big
you know,
things
we're not going to
closed.
know.
Have big things closed in your area?
Oh yeah, and some. I mean, sort of every week there's something in the paper about restaurants, and a couple that really weren't expected to throw in the towel have, which is sad. We're trying to do our part to, you know, order out 2 or 3 times a week with the smaller restaurants, and so they can keep going. And some of them, there's a really, really good Italian right around the corner, and they're busy all the time, just as busy now as they were when you could eat in, which is great because they're just so
They're
good.
one of the best in the city.
Yeah, they really are.
But meanwhile, in the Boston Globe yesterday, I guess, that 3 of the mainstay restaurants in Kenmore Square, which is right next to Fenway Park, some have been there for years and years. 3 are closing. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a major
But
loss for that area, but there's nothing going on.
there's no ball games, and there aren't many BU students, so Kenmore Square is kind of a ghost town right now.
Right. So we'll see what happens on the other side of this.
Yeah.
Well, again, thank you very much. And when your CD
Thank you.
Yeah,
comes
you're
out,
welcome.
maybe we can talk again. We'll get a little publicity for the new.
Yep, We'll let you know.
Is there a title for it?
No, we haven't even come up with a
No,
title
we
yet.
haven't. It will come out of one of the songs.
Yeah.
All our recordings, the titles come either.
The titles often come after we finish the recording.
Right,
And-
and they tend, sometimes they're the title of a song on the recording, like Reaching for the Moon.
Yeah,
But in the case of other ones, like Keep on Smiling or Come On and Here, they tend to be lyrics from the song, from within one of the songs on the
Yeah.
recording.
I don't think we're going to call it the 10 unbest dressed women, the 10 best undressed women in the world.
No, and we won't call it the Chevrolet commercial.
Right, or I Like Ike.
Right.
But we've got some possibilities.
Good. How
Okay.
long does one last question? How long does it normally take to do an album?
We usually record over 3 days. There have been exceptions, but usually it's 3 days.
or-
Yeah, usually consecutive. And then the real work is listening to the takes and figuring out what the edits are. And then we give it back to the producer, and you know how long it takes him to get the edits done. So it can be a couple of months before anything really is ready.
Right, and then before that, you've got what all these recordings start with is that the reason these are in volumes, as it were, is they cover a specific time period, or a songwriter. And what we do for the Berlin songs is that we get hold of every single song, published and unpublished, that we can from that time period or associated with the specific point of the recording. And we read through every single song, and we grade the songs, and then we narrow it down to the songs we like, and then we narrow it down further and further until we get about anywhere from 20 to 24 songs total. And then
And that's a long process.
It's a long process. I mean, collecting the songs themselves for I think this last recording, you know, it took a lot of research to begin to find what songs we needed to be looking for.
Yeah.
And then it took about 6 months to a year to collect them.
Yeah.
And then we had to give ourselves about 2 to 3 months to run through them once, twice, 3 times, and then start the narrowing down process until we finally came up with the final roster. And then you have to start rehearsing them and learning.
Right. And really the end of 2019, we were starting to get things rolling in terms of really getting the songs learned and setting a date
and including them in shows.
Yeah. And then something happened in February, so it didn't happen.
And that sort of knocked the wind out of us.
Yeah.
But they're still there, and we still are running through them occasionally. And again, when this is over, they'll start flooding out, and then comes the 3-day recording process and the 2-month editing process, and then the design process. You know, it's not overnight. It doesn't take place overnight for us.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll look forward to all that, and thank you again for a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Take care.
Bruce.
Stay
Bye-bye.
safe and healthy.
Bye.